when what you can do involves getting tackled and maybe CTE later and hip replacement and everything. There are real risks associated. And since it's such a major sport and such a major generator of revenue, even more than basketball or baseball, MLB or NBA in this country, you'd expect the athletes to be compensated accordingly. But in fact, what we find, and that's even when you adjust for roster size, right? Like the NFL, what's the cap now? About 180-ish million a year. You got to divide that up over 53 players. So that's like saying a Major League Baseball team with a roster less than half the size, that's like saying that the highest you can spend in Major League Baseball is $90 million. But in fact, what we see is teams like the Red Sox and Yankees and Dodgers spending over $200 million a lot of seasons. So even when you adjust for stuff that you should adjust for, you see NFL players getting paid less than 50 cents on the dollar to do a much, much, much more dangerous job. And that's because they just destroy the players in the CBA negotiation, in the collective bargaining negotiations, because they're running a de facto monopoly, Stephen A. Let's face it, the players have no real recourse. And the difference in baseball is treated as a monopoly. It's considered a monopoly. So the way the players can deal with it legally is different. But since the NFL and NBA, let's stick with the NFL right now, are not, the way the players can deal with it is just the way they can deal with it. They can basically take it or leave it offers. And so this is the situation they get. Of course they're sitting at the children's table when it comes to the way they're paid.
They're sitting at the children's table when it comes to the way they're getting paid, Max, for some of the reasons that you articulated, and it's undeniable that we all wish that the NFL players were treated better and they were getting more. Having said all of that, I think that there's far more emotion in your answer than there should be. Let's knock this down. You look at the National Football League. The sport is so violent. You're talking about paying guys and guaranteeing money when there's almost a guarantee aimed in the opposite direction. When I look at basketball, it's a 12-man roster, but you can have up to 14 guys, okay? You're going to have those guys getting paid. And the sport is far less physical. When you talk about Major League Baseball, you've got 25 guys on a roster, okay? You're playing 162 games. Have y'all ever watched baseball players out in the field? I mean, if you're standing in the outfield, particularly if you have a good pitcher, who, by the way, is only obligated to pitch practically once every 4 or 5 days, you can literally sit in the outfield eating sunflower seeds with some shades on, chilling up and talking to people. The ball ain't going to even come your way half the damn time. It's literally like that in the sport of Major League Baseball. Yet still, of course, their numbers are guaranteed. In the sport of football, you're talking about literally a guarantee, almost a guarantee, that injuries are going to come your way. And so because of the volatility of the sport and how so easily it incurs injury, that obviously plays a significant role. Then when you take into account the fact that it's, then when you take into account the fact that it's a 53-man roster, so not 25 like Major League Baseball with no little physical duress. Not that it's 12 to 14 in the NBA with lesser physical duress. You're talking about football, arguably the most violent sport, where I can give you money and one play could potentially end your career. When you are a players association and you're collectively bargaining to ensure that players are taken care of with guaranteed dollars, when it's almost guaranteed that they're going to get injured, you can understand what the discrepancy is all about.
I think you're making a good point about injury when you talk about length of contract and overall guaranteed dollars. That is true. In other words, the idea that it's so violent, these guys should be paid more because of the risk they're taking. No, from a point of view of organizing a business, you don't want to invest as much as long-term in these players because of the risk they're taking. I think that's a good point. But when you look at what the top-paid players in football make per year, it's in line with what the top-paid players in baseball make per year. And then you can say, well, actually, it's twice as much because the rosters are twice as large. But the football economy is also about twice as large as the baseball economy. And there's no player on a baseball team as important as a quarterback, for example. And so when you start to adjust it, again, you see the players' salaries are being kept artificially low. What's keeping them artificially low? Well, let's look at the way the business is structured. Beyond just not guaranteeing long-term.
Artificially low in comparison to baseball.
Long-term contracts, I agree with you, but per annum, per year, the reason it's kept low, there's no cap in baseball, just a luxury tax, which does discipline the market, but still not like a hard cap. There's a soft cap in basketball, right? Because you can grandfather in under the bird rules and everything like that.
Right.
But in football, there's a hard cap. And whenever you see, boys and girls, remember this, whenever you see a hard cap that's not primarily about competitive balance, that's a lie. It's primarily about diverting revenue from players to small market owners. That's what a hard cap does. That's what it does in the NFL. They are artificially keeping salaries low, and that money is being redirected to line the owners' pockets.
I am in no way trying to come to the defense of owners because I don't disagree with your point, and I do believe that NFL athletes, considering the level of duress that they're put on themselves, physically deserve more. But it's incredibly important to recognize that if you're looking at it and you're trying to project or disseminate a message about the owners looking out for themselves in terms of a business, first of all, that's not news. We understand they're going to always do that. But more importantly, let's understand the impetus behind it all. The reality is that even if I give a quarterback like an Aaron Rodgers, for example, over $100 million and a Matt Ryan and others, the risk that comes along with the sport that they play. And it's a risk that another sport like baseball never has to concern itself with. Plus, the roster is half as much. So you got to take all of that into consideration and recognize why it happened.
In terms of their own health, and then the owners, if they're going to be able to stand up.
When you run it through that formula, I agree, it's not as lopsided as it appears. But still, the NFL players are being underpaid.